Say hi.
Okay, a warm welcome to everyone. Do be mindful of your masks and your social distancing. Let's all stay safe and healthy. Thanks all for coming. There's lots of space up here at the front. If people want to come forward, there's more space here. Thanks to the folks from Greenfield and Turner's Falls who brought their lovely banners. Thank you very much. Thanks to the Northampton Historical Society who has asked Frances to come tonight. We're glad she's here with us. So we're gathering at Nagasaki Pond, which unfortunately is toxic at the moment, and we cannot do our floating lanterns. We're going to do a symbolic walking lanterns. But this is Nagasaki Pond on land that was home for native peoples for thousands of years. We acknowledge that this place is within the ancestral homelands of the Naugatuck peoples. We also recognize our present-day neighboring indigenous nations, the Nipmuc and Wampanoag to the east, the Mohican and Pequot to the south, the Mohican to the west, and the Abenaki to the north. Abenaki to the north. We acknowledge, too, the presence of Native people among us. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. Tonight, we're remembering what happened 75 years ago in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we're remembering. We are acknowledging and honoring the survivors, the Hibakusha, and those who died during and after the bombings. We are committing ourselves to act to abolish nuclear weapons. No nukes, never again. Now, the program tonight does not, fortunately, feature a full moon rising over Mount Tom. We had that happen in the past, and it was gorgeous. But for our program tonight, we'll hear Dr. Andy Larkin give us some history of what happened 75 years ago. We'll listen to the letter Setsuko Thurlow has written to President Trump, in which she shares her experiences and her request that the U.S. sign and ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And Vicki Elson will read that letter for us. Robert Jonas will play his shakuhachi flute, providing time and space to open our hearts and minds to remember, to honor, and to act. We'll hear about a legislative victory for Northampton, the approval of a home rule petition. Representative Lindsay Sabadosa will tell that story. Miranda Grew, staff member at the Resistance Center for Peace and Justice, will help us focus on the actions we can take to eliminate nuclear weapons. We'll end with a candlelight vigil and a symbolic floating lantern ceremony. The floating lanterns remind us of our solidarity with Japanese peacemakers. And I'll say more about the vigil and the ceremony a little later. And now, Andy, member of the Nuclear and Carbon-Free Coalition, retired doctor and avid rower, will talk about the history of the bombings.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. How's that sound? Thank you so much for the invitation, Doc. The official story about dropping the atomic bombs on Japan was it was necessary to save thousands and thousands of Americans. Let me say, the first victim of war is the truth. At the beginning of the war, the U.S. feared that Germany would develop an atomic bomb. Many scientists came from Europe to the U.S. to join in the race to build such a weapon here first and defeat fascism. Parenthetically, Daniel Ellsberg reports that when Hitler heard about the destructive power of the bomb, he canceled the project. 75 years ago, World War II was ending. In May, Germany surrendered. The purpose for dropping the bomb was gone. The U.S. started firing body cities in Japan. On March 9th, half of Tokyo was destroyed with 100,000 dead and millions homeless. Other cities were ominously spared, including Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In 1942, U.S. Army General Leslie Groves had taken charge of the Manhattan Project, which was to develop an atomic bomb and to keep it a secret from Russia. In April 1945, Truman became the president, and he only then first learned about the bomb. There were theoretical concerns that a chain reaction might destroy the entire Earth. Some felt a demonstration to the Japanese military to see for themselves, but what if the bomb failed? They would be embarrassed. Common Dreams reports that 8 out of 9 of the 5-star generals were opposed to the use of the bomb. President Truman's chief of staff, Admiral William Leahy, wrote that the bombings was of no material assistance. Eisenhower voiced the concern that the dropping of the bomb was completely unnecessary. However, other voices prevailed, and Truman was convinced he should use the bomb. He was practical. He felt it would be wrong to spend the money and not use it. Racism played a role. He thought Japanese should be killed. He gave a vague order to use them when they became available. Leslie Groves, in charge of the atomic bombs, felt that the real enemy is not fascist Germany, but rather Russian communism. He wanted the Russians to know we had a bomb. It would be the opening shot of the Cold War. The Allies demanded unconditional surrender. The Japanese would surrender if the emperor were spared. The U.S. refused. On July 19th, the U.S. tested the first bomb, sacrilegiously named Trinity, made of plutonium. The bomb exploded as predicted. Robert Oppenheimer, the lead scientist, declared, "Now we are the creator. Now we are the destroyer." On August 6th, the U.S. bombed Hiroshima with Thin Man, a uranium bomb. Tens of thousands were killed immediately. More died subsequently. However, the fact that one more city was destroyed by a single bomb may have been lost in the disbelief in the fog of war. On August 8, 1945, the Sino-Soviet War began. The Soviet army attacked Japan, their previous ally. With 1 million troops in Manchuria, they attacked from the west, the north, and the east. Japan was ready to surrender. The U.S. was now willing to spare the empire. Leslie Groves, though, wanted to know what was a better bomb. On the morning of August 9th, the U.S. bombed Nagasaki with Fat Boy, a plutonium bomb. Again, fireballs and explosions killed thousands. Others died from burns, injuries, from flying debris, malnutrition from a defeated country. Thousands of Koreans died. American prisoners of war died. And then, The physicians began to notice a new illness, radiation sickness. The survivors would be called the hibakusha. I speak today to carry the witnessing that my father observed as a radiologist. He toured Nagasaki after the bomb and wrote the first paper. He described the cold injuries from radiation, the cold skin injuries, the fall in the white blood count, and the protection clothing provided against radiation burns. He, like many of this greatest generation, was told to go home and to keep silent. At times he had the 1,000-yard stare seen in victims of trauma. Leslie Groves sent investigators to both cities and published a book, The Atomic Bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The cities had been picked because they were comparable. We could have a scientific experiment. The book reported that plutonium made a better bomb. They only studied the buildings. There's no investigation of radiation sickness. The army censored the photographs of the river filled with corpses. They were too much like the photos of the concentration camps in Europe, showing that the Germans were capable of evil. Telford Taylor, chief prosecutor at Nuremberg trials, said, "This indeed was a war crime." By the end of the war, at the beginning of the war, the U.S. might have held a high ground that they would not target civilians. By the end of the war, we had lost our moral superiority. As A.J. Muste said, the problem after war is the victor. He thinks that war and violence play. We declared that the bomb ended the war, and now many believe that nuclear weapons make us safe. At times, I wonder how much different the world might have been if the surrender had come in sooner, the bombs were not dropped, and Leslie Groves had to keep his nuclear secret to himself. I would like to be able to say the last time we dropped a bomb on people was at Nagasaki. However, in peace and in friendship, we dropped 67 nuclear bombs over the Marshall Islands, calculated to be equivalent to one Hiroshima bomb daily for 12 years. There were over 200 above-ground testing. Many Americans in the mountain states, the downwinders of the testing sites in Nevada suffered radiation sickness. As other countries joined in, there were a total of 500 atmospheric testing around the world. By then, there were atomic bomb survivors, sufferers all over the world. There were atomic veterans who were deliberately exposed. The dairies of our heartland were contaminated with strontium-90, and we were warned against drinking the milk. At that time, the public rose in indignation, and the above-ground testing was banned in August 1963 by international treaty. I'd like to remind you that the public has made a difference. Other people were exposed to radiation through mining, including the indigenous peoples of Australia and of South Dakota. There was a huge industrial accident in Mayak, Russia in 1957. The CIA covered this, repressed the story because they didn't want it to get out that these plants were dangerous. Manufacturing sites as Hannaford, Washington, have become environmental catastrophes. Later, nuclear weapons exploded at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. I would like to be able to say that we have spent enough money on nuclear weapons, but the U.S. plans to spend $1 trillion more to upgrade our nuclear arsenal. In The Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad famously wrote about the horror in Africa. I believe that the horror occurred in Hiroshima and Nagasaki when white men used science to destroy innocent people, leaving the nuclear genie out of Pandora's box, leaving only hope. It is my hope that we contain the nuclear genie before it destroys the earth. Thank you so much for your attention.
We have Vicki Elson, who's going to read Setsuko Thurlow's letter to the United States and to the President. Vicki is very active in the campaign for treaty compliance and very active in nuclearban.us.
Thank you. Setsuko Thurlow is 88 years old. She doesn't want your skin to melt, and she has a plan. 75 years ago, when she was 13, Setsuko found herself crawling out of the radioactive rubble of Hiroshima. She heard a voice urging her to climb toward the light. I'm going to read a little excerpt of the letter she sent to all the leaders of the world, including President Trump. She said, "Miraculously, I was rescued from the rubble of a collapsed building about 1.8 kilometers from ground zero. Most of my classmates in the same room were burned to death alive. If this is too much for you, don't listen to the next bit. I can still hear their voices calling their mothers and God for help. As I escaped with 2 other surviving girls, we saw a procession of ghostly figures slowly shuffling from the center of the city. Grotesquely wounded people whose clothes were tattered or who were made naked by the blast. They were bleeding, burnt, blackened, and swollen. Parts of their bodies were missing, flesh and skin hanging from their bones, some with their eyeballs hanging in their hands, some with their stomachs burst open. In the weeks, months, and years that followed, many thousands more would die, often in random and mysterious ways, from the delayed effects of radiation. Still, to this day, radiation is killing survivors. Every person who died had a name. Every person was loved by someone." 3 years ago, Setsuko and her colleagues at the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, of which many here are a part, received the Nobel Peace Prize for their work on the game-changing United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. In her acceptance speech, Setsuko said, "Our light is now the ban treaty. To all in this hall and all listening around the world, I repeat those words that I heard called to me in the ruins of Hiroshima. Don't give up." The treaty is being signed and ratified around the world. And I want to share with you, if you haven't heard yet, this week, just in the last 3 or 4 days, 4 more countries have ratified the treaty. Yeah. We have Ireland. This is going to be huge, having a huge effect on Europe and NATO. We have Nigeria, very large country. We have St. Kitts and Nevis, a sweet spot indeed. And we have a country I am sorry to admit I'd never even heard of. It's called Niue, N-I-U-E. It's a little island off the coast of New Zealand with a population of 1,600. And its ratification counts just as much as any other nation. So that's 4. We're up to 44 ratifications, 6 more, and this will be international law. Okay, it'll enter into force. So this is just a very exciting week. And those 4 came through in honor of this 75th anniversary. So it's been a really hopeful, beautiful week. Unfortunately, the 9 nuclear nations have not yet signed or ratified the treaty. In fact, they boycotted the negotiations. But the U.S. has already joined treaties prohibiting chemical and biological weapons. Setsuko believes that nuclear weapons should be next, must be next. She's urging all nations to participate in the systematic multilateral agreement to dismantle every last warhead. Here's one more bit of her letter to President Trump. On behalf of the victims and survivors of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as all of us who have been affected by nuclear testing, particularly indigenous people across the world, I urge you to take action and become a state party to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons without delay. If you want to learn more about Setsuko, I am delighted to tell you that there's a new documentary about her, and it's screening for free today until midnight. So if you want to see it, this is where you go. Just till midnight tonight it's free. After that it'll be a little bit trickier to get hold of. So, come to me and take a picture of this, or I'll just read it to you. It's vimeo.com/on-demand/The Vow from Hiroshima, all one word. VOW. Vimeo, vimeo.com/on-demand/The Vow from Hiroshima.com. Very exciting. Thank you all for being here today. This is a bittersweet and very tender and loving day for all of us. Thanks.
Robert Jonas is going to give us a little break by playing some music. He lives here in Northampton. He leads meditation groups. He assists Christian and Buddhist dialogues, among many other things. So Jonas, please help us open our hearts and minds.
Let's bring our awareness to our breathing, rooted in the earth. If there's to be any more burning, my prayer would be that everything that is not love is burned away. Everything that is not love is burned away. And can we live that way with ourselves and with each other? My teacher, the shakuhachi instrument, bamboo flute, just a piece of bamboo, and the wind through the bamboo makes a sound. And my teacher's in Kyoto, Yoshio Kurahashi. His family was devastated by the bomb, both bombs. And he taught me a piece called Kojo no Tsuki. Kojo no Tsuki means moon over the ruined castle. And this is our situation now, really. We are in the midst of ruination, and yet there is this moon of hope, the moon of love, the moon of Mother Earth, if you will, of God, that opens our hearts even in the midst of devastation. This requires tremendous discipline to keep refocusing, and not to be drawn into depression and rage and hopelessness. Moon over the ruined castle.
We've had a small legislative victory. Is Lindsay Sabadosa here?
Yep.
So I'll let Lindsay explain what happened.
Thank you, everyone. It's very hard to speak after such a moment of peace like that, so I'm sorry to be the one to break that moment. I have to start by acknowledging that I am speaking here with Frances this evening, who I think we need to call Frances Crowe into all spaces and to let her continue to guide us in this work. I know she was an inspiration to me. I am sure she was an inspiration to you. I'm here to speak this evening about, again, a small legislative victory that we had this session, a home rule petition. And I was asked to not go into great depth about what a home rule petition is, so I will simply say it is a piece of legislation that affects one community. And in this case, it's the city of Northampton. And the city of Northampton, through the wisdom of city council and incredible advocates, many of whom are here this evening, videoing, for example, put forth a proposal, a legislative proposal, asking that the city, when they are putting anything out to bid, first of all verify that the person responding to that bid is not involved in the manufacture, production, or sale of nuclear weapons. And the city has the right to say that they will not accept a bid from any party who engages in those activities.
Yay!
Now, this is small, but it is the way that the city can work to, within its own confines, to follow what the treaty is asking on a much larger level. But the city, we all have our own little place that we can play, and this is how the city of Northampton has decided to engage and participate and to reaffirm its values. Now, I was also asked tonight to say, how did this happen? How did this legislation go through? So I will tell you a funny story. The bill initially had a much larger name, and it talked about the disqualification of manufacturers of nuclear weapons. And as it was moving through the House, someone looked at me and they said, please stop filing bills with the word nuclear in the title. It will be so much easier for us to pass them. And so the title now is simply disqualification of bidders. It has been passed by both the House and the Senate and signed by the governor. And I'm hopeful that this is the first of many cities, because we were the first in Massachusetts to do this. We are joining others in California. But I'm hopeful that every other city and town in Massachusetts will follow suit, and that this will help us then pass more far-reaching statewide legislation as well. So thank you very much for having me this evening. Thank you for all that you do. May you be blessed and in peace.
It was my understanding that the mayor from Easthampton is here tonight. Is that right?
Yes, hi.
Hi. Good to have you. Do you want to say a word or welcome? Or?
Sure.
Yay!
Thank you very much for coming.
Okay.
So I too am glad to see Frances in this space. The last time I saw her was here last year, and we had a lovely conversation about what a horrible singer that I was, but she admired my grit and perseverance. So that was one memory from out there. Thank you, all of you, for coming. There is so much turmoil in the world right now, and when it was on my calendar to stop by, I didn't realize I was speaking. I wanted to do the walk this year. My young aide asked me, well, why? This happened so long ago. And I gave her some poetry from children who experienced the bombings and what that meant to them, and it was quite graphic. And she started crying, and she said, I did not know that at 22. I said, so this is why every year we do this. This is why folks come and gather. And thank you so much for doing this here in Easthampton. And I know so many of you have been devoted to this cause, to this, you know, golden value, that folks shouldn't have to make a choice about if their country buys guns or bombs or food. There's one word for it. It's food, it's clothing, it's housing, it's caring, it's compassion. Thank you all, and be well.
Thank you. Thanks.
Now, Miranda Grew, who's doing an excellent job wiping off his microphone and setting up the sound system, going to give us, talk about some of the actions that we can take to keep moving forward on eliminating nuclear weapons.
Yay.
Almost the last time I will do that. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to all our wonderful speakers. Thank you, Representative Sabadosa, for being here. And thank you to each of us for joining us tonight as we reflect together. As Doug said, my name is Miranda Grew. I'm a staff member at the Resistance Center for Peace and Justice. The theme tonight, as we know, includes 3 directives: remember, honor, and act. The racist bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were indescribably tragic, and we know we cannot let this happen again. But instead of collectively moving towards abolition and making sure this will never happen again, those in power, many of our elected officials and their war profiteers, have entered into yet another dangerous nuclear arms race, this time with modern weapons so much more powerful. It's not, to be clear, it's not that someone in Washington, didn't learn their lesson. It's that profit and power matter more to them than human life. The Pentagon's nuclear weapon modernization effort is on track to surpass $2 trillion, as was said, in coming decades. And meanwhile, millions of us remain unemployed or without health care during the biggest public health crisis of our lifetime. This is terrifying and this is unacceptable, and we must act. The planning group this evening has come up with a number of action steps you can take to make sure that we're moving toward nuclear abolition, both locally, nationally, and globally. We don't expect you all to take notes while I read our action steps. You can also take a look at a poster. I think it's way over there in the corner, and it has a link to a website. It's a short link, so bit.ly/nomorenukesma. It's case sensitive, and that will take you to a document with our action steps typed up for you. Additionally, if you do have a smartphone, there's a QR code. So if you just open your smartphone, open your camera, and hold it right up to the poster, it will bring you right to the website where you can learn how to take action. And now I'll tell you what those action steps are. So locally, you can be sure to attend the Resistance Center's workshop tomorrow night at 7 p.m. called Our Neighbor L3 Harris, the War Machine. L3 Harris is a weapon contractor just right around the corner in Northampton. We'll be talking about the military-industrial complex and how it shows up in our community, and specifically L3's connections to violence, to police militarism, and to nuclear power as well. You can also email the Easthampton mayor, thank you for being here, and city council thanking them for supporting nuclear abolition, but also asking them to take that next step and divest and file a home rule petition just as Northampton did. This petition allows the city to refuse contracts, as we just heard, with companies involved in the design, manufacture, and maintenance of nuclear weapons. Nationally, you can make sure your federal legislators are supporting H.R. 2419. This is a bill that would convert nuclear weapon money and brainpower to green technologies. While McGovern has signed on, many of our elected officials have not. And then do tell your friends in different districts and states to do the same thing. And globally, we can call our senators, Senator Warren and Senator Markey, and pressure them to support the UN's treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, a treaty which Vicki mentioned 44 nations have signed on to. Needless to say, the U.S. is not one of them yet. And then we can all sign the Habuksha Appeal, which calls on all our governments to sign and ratify the treaty. So again, that is a lot. There is that poster right over there if you do want to take a picture of it on your way out or scan it with the QR code. We want to hold in our hearts that on the 75th anniversary of these bombings, it's not enough to simply remember each year. We want to ask ourselves, where do we want to be on the 80th anniversary, the 100th, the 200th? We can dream big and create a nuclear-free future together. I think we're already starting to. So thank you.
Yay.
Okay, as I said earlier, we can't put our lanterns in the water. So we're going to do a symbolic floating lantern ceremony. I'm going to suggest that if the Peace Pagoda people would help out here, and we're going to have to ask for volunteers to come and pick up a lantern and to walk socially distanced all the way down to that walkway and slowly back this way, and then put your lantern back down here. And that will be our symbolic floating of the lanterns. And then if you have brought a candle, you can light it and have your own little vigil, your little soul candle, while we're watching this symbolic carrying of the floating lanterns. So we're doing this a symbolic floating lantern. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Ceremony is held each year on August 6th at Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. Some 50,000, I hear this year was much lower because of the pandemic. Some 50,000 local citizens and visitors, as well as ambassadors and dignitaries from around 70 countries, gathered to console the spirits of those killed by the atomic bomb and also to pray for lasting peace. So we do this in solidarity with what happened on Thursday in Hiroshima. So if the monks will join me and start this carrying the lanterns, and if some volunteers will come forward and each take a lantern and join in this procession down to that other walkway and back. And if you've got your individual candles, if you can light them and let that be your vigil while we're watching this symbolic floating lantern ceremony. Now, once the floating lanterns have finished their journey, Reverend Peter Kakos will give us a blessing, a benediction, and then Robert Jonas will play his flute again as the end of our time together. So, if the monks, yeah, Sister Claire, I'm wondering if you could start over here. Good idea. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you'll just do your thing here. Okay, good. Okay, could I have some volunteers? You want to carry a candle? So, yeah, good. What if you would mind? Okay, great. Just wait just a minute to get some more volunteers. Lynn? Is there someone right here?
Lindsay.
Great, thank you. Andy, thank you. Anyone else want to carry a... Well, I asked the gentleman from... Good, yes, let's take one.
We need to light the lighters in there.
actually just very happy watching everyone. It's beautiful. It's really nice to see you. It's nice to see you too. I don't know, it's so sad not seeing. I love seeing Chloe out later.
It's in there. It's in there.
Chloe and her husband are some of my favorite people. Chloe's in purple. Beautiful purple, if you notice. Mask, chain, shoes, hair. Love it. Yes. She wrote a piece for the Gazette. It was maybe a year ago about true love and being in love with your husband for 50 plus years. And it was just the most heartwarming, wonderful thing ever. Everybody should know it.
We're going on 2 years.
Oh wow. But that's still an accomplishment.
We've been together for 3. We were living in Sin for the first year.
That's all right.
That's pretty sweet. Tim's going to get a new baby this month. In England. We can't go there.
Yeah, we can't go.
Oh, that's so hard. I have a colleague whose daughter lives in Edinburgh, and she's just devastated. She's like, I don't know when I get to see my children.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This password is
Yes.
okay, well, if you need anything,
I will let you know.
We're your fan club.
Likewise. Thank you.
we will definitely.
Well, we have Cambridge wants to do the thing. Did you tell her?
Oh, I didn't.
So it's a good tip that don't put nuclear in
Just
there.
use the same title. Sheriff Third
I gave them the
like,
copy of
please
it.
stop bringing things to me with these titles. It's like, I can get them through for you easier if it just seemed very innocuous.
We should consult with Lindsay on our book. We're writing a future history.
Well, we want her daughter. How old is your daughter?
She's 13.
13. That's a good age.
Yeah, that's a good age. Yeah, we want you guys to tell us what you think. We're not there yet with anything to show you, but
When you are.
it's all about getting young people in big groups. Taking the stuff that's not with grown-ups.
We had that conversation the other day. She said, but I don't understand how to save the world. I said, it's all right. You just need to do your little bit.
Good work. Good work. You got your candle?
Yeah.
Can you get the lighter for them? Those guys?
Oh, sure. Hi, love. Can I introduce you? Yeah, sure. That's pretty good.
Nice.
This is our representative, Lindsay Sabadosa. She's one of our big heroes. She already knows that. This is Tracy Lozano, or Lily. And this is Hawaii Herrera Diaz. And they're going to be part of that generation we're talking about.
Heading for Congress, right?
Hawaii just graduated from UMass with a degree in international relations.
No,
Political science. Political science.
Thank you.
It's a hard year to graduate.
It is, yeah.
Mm.
Getting through it.
They're in our germ bubble.
I'm gonna end this now, unless. Oh, here we go. Okay, Peter's final thing.
Peter Tekos, I like to refer to him as an unretired UCC minister. He's been very active, and we've been working very hard in UCC churches. So he's going to give us our closing benediction, and I think we will not be having music.
Got
I
someone
think
from England
Jonas had to
this
leave.
watching.
But here's our closing benediction.
Peace like a river. Thank you, Doug, and bless you all for being here. The lanterns for me symbolize the lights of the souls of the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I'd like to dedicate this benediction to them. May the everlasting lights of the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki guide us to complete abolition of nuclear warheads, exposing the inexcusable insanity of the business of annihilation. Peace to you within, and to a world without a single weapon of mass destruction. Amen.
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 Peace like a river.
Yay.